Hey everybody, I'm James Conole, founder of Root Financial Partners, and I'm here to teach you what you need to know to create a secure retirement. Now, when you're working, you have a paycheck coming in every couple weeks or so, and that paycheck helps you to cover all of the expenses that you have. But when you retire, that paycheck goes away. When that paycheck goes away, it can be overwhelming to understand where you should pull income from first. Not just that, but if you pull income from the wrong place at the wrong time, it could potentially lead to you paying more in taxes than you need to in retirement. In today's video, we're going to talk about where you should pull funds from first in retirement so that you can create the income you need and keep your taxes as low as possible throughout retirement. Once you retire, it's really up to you to create your own paycheck. Your salary is gone and it is up to you to determine where is income going to come from next. Now, in retirement, many times it's not just one paycheck that you're creating, but it's a series of many paychecks. It might be income from investment accounts. It might be income from other places like Social Security or pension. And the real question is, how can we combine these series of many paychecks to replace that one big paycheck that we had to be able to create the lifestyle that we want to have in retirement? So how do we go about doing that? Well, there's a few things that we need to do. Number one, you need to understand what fixed income sources that you will have. So before we talk about should I pull funds from an IRA or a 401k or a Roth IRA or a brokerage account, set that aside for a second. Really the first question is, what fixed income sources will you have? That could be Social Security, it could be a pension, it could be rental income, it could be annuity income. It's anything that's coming in, any income coming in that doesn't require you to pull money from your portfolio. Why do we start with that? Well, that's money that's just going to be there, almost like as a foundation or the base. You don't have to plan for that. You don't have to create that through investing the right way. It's just income that's coming in before you have to tap into your portfolio. So that's important to start, because in retirement, as you're replacing a paycheck, really what you're trying to do is replace some level of income. So step number one is understanding what level of income is going to be coming in before I tap into my portfolio. So if here's the income I want to have, how much is coming from Social Security and pension and rental income, so that you see what base you have, knowing that the difference, that's the amount that's going to need to come from your portfolio. So step number two is to do just that, is to understand what's the shortfall between those fixed income sources, those Social Security and pension and rental income sources. What's the difference between that and the level of expenses that you want to have to support your ideal retirement? So let's look at an example. Assume you want to spend $100,000 per year in retirement after taxes. That's your goal. That's the income goal that you have. But what you do know is that maybe between you and a spouse, $45,000 of that is coming in from Social Security. What that tells us is the remaining $55,000 needs to come from your portfolio if you don't have any additional pension or other income sources. So if $100,000 is our goal and $45,000 is coming from Social Security, and we're not factoring in taxes yet, but the difference, that's what needs to come from your portfolio. Now, step three here, so once you've determined what your fixed income sources are, step one, once you've determined the difference or the shortfall between those fixed income sources and your expenses, step two, step number three is to understand the different types of accounts that you have. And in general, there's three main types of accounts. There are taxable accounts, which might be an individual account or a joint account or a trust account, really any investment account that you have that isn't in some type of a retirement account. Those are just considered taxable accounts. Number two, you have tax-deferred accounts. These are traditional IRAs, SEP IRAs, simple IRAs, 401ks, 403bs. Any money that you've put away pre-tax, meaning it hasn't been taxed yet, and it's growing tax-deferred, but when you pull it out, it will all be fully taxable. That's the second type, tax-deferred accounts. And the third type is tax-free accounts. And these are essentially Roth IRAs and Roth 401ks. Any type of account that you have where whatever you pull out of it, that money is not taxable at all because you've already paid the taxes on it. So step number three is, what are the different types of accounts that you have between taxable, tax-deferred, and tax-free? Now, here's one approach. Most people, they start with that, and most people's approach is they'll say, you know what, it makes sense to fully spend the taxable account first. Spend the individual accounts, the brokerage accounts, the joint accounts, spend those first. Because you have these IRAs and these Roth IRAs, and there's some great tax benefits for that. Any growth on that, it grows completely tax-free, at least tax-deferred. So let's preserve those and let those grow as long as possible. And there is a lot of truth to that. So the general approach is, can we fully spend down our taxable accounts first? And then can we spend down our tax deferred accounts? IRAs, 401ks, things like that. And then finally spend down the Roth IRAs, because we want the Roth IRAs growing as long as possible, because all of that money is completely tax-free. So let's push that off. Let's maximize the growth before we start spending it down. Now, that can be a good starting point for an approach. But what it doesn't focus on is it doesn't focus on how do we minimize the overall tax bracket throughout retirement, which is something that's very important, and really it's going to be the main driver of where you should pull funds from first in retirement. I want to take a more specific approach, and this specific approach should be driven by taxes and driven by the tax brackets that you'll be in. And let's use an example to show what this looks like. Let's assume that you have a pension and you have Social Security and they cover some of your needs. But let's still assume that you need another $40,000 of income from investments to live on. So Social Security and pension covers a part, but you still need $40,000 more from your income or your portfolio. Let's also assume that your taxable income, so the amount of taxes you're paying on Social Security and your pension, is $60,000. Now, that's important to know, because if you look at the federal tax brackets in 2021, you'll know that once your taxable income exceeds $80,250, if you're married, filing jointly, what happens after that is you're going to jump up into a new tax bracket. Anything below $80,250 is taxed at 12% at the federal level. Anything above $80,250 is taxed at 22%. So it's a pretty significant jump. Income up until that threshold is taxed at 12%, but income above that threshold and before hitting the next one is taxed at 22%, almost double the taxes. So if you need another $40,000, if you were to take that all from a traditional IRA, then what that does is it says if you already have $60,000 of taxable income, and I pull another $40,000 from a traditional IRA, I now have $100,000 of taxable income, which means I've filled up the remainder of the 12% tax bracket up to $80,250, and I've gone up another $20,000 or so, which is now taxed at 22%. What does that do? What does that matter? Can we control that? Yes. If we have multiple types of accounts, if we have taxable accounts, tax deferred, and tax-free, one potential thing that you could do is say, if I already have $60,000 of taxable income between pensions and Social Security, I know that I need $40,000 more dollars, but I know that I only have about $20,000 left in this tax bracket before I jump up into the next. Could I potentially take $20,000 from a traditional IRA? So just enough to fill up this tax bracket, which keeps me at the 12% bracket, but then any amounts above that, can I take tax-free money from my taxable accounts or from cash accounts or even potentially from Roth accounts if it makes sense? So what that does is, as I'm looking at the $40,000 of income that I need from my portfolio, instead of paying about half of it at 12% and half of it at 22%, I'm only paying 12% because any other income above the $80,250 threshold, I'm taking from a tax-free nature, either because it's on an after-tax account I've already paid taxes on, or it's a Roth account. So that's just an example, but what you can see from that example is where you should pull funds from first in retirement really doesn't have as much to do with an investment strategy, because hypothetically you might have the same investments in your Roth accounts and your IRA accounts and your taxable accounts. Now, due to something called asset location, I probably recommend against that, but many people, that's just what they have. So it's not as if withdrawing from one account first is going to change your overall investment strategy or the growth that you can expect over time. But what taking a more specific, a more intentional approach to where you're withdrawing funds from first does is it helps to lower your tax bracket, and it helps you to manage your overall tax bracket to keep it as low as possible for as long as possible throughout retirement. Now, here's some things to be mindful of on top of this example. Number one, allow tax deferred accounts to work. If at all possible, let your Roth IRAs grow as much as they can. Anything inside of a Roth IRA or Roth 401k, you're never paying taxes on again. So instead of spending that money down today, can we let that money keep growing? Can it double, triple, or more over time so that tax benefit isn't just whatever the value of your Roth is today, but it might be double that or triple that if you let that money keep compounding over time. So let tax-free accounts continue to work, let tax-deferred accounts even continue to work because of the tax savings you get on an annual basis going forward. Now, another thing to be mindful of, as you're determining where do I pull funds from first in retirement, is be aware of what are called required minimum distributions in the future. If you have a significant brokerage account, for example, so an after-tax account, you could potentially keep your tax bracket very low the first several years of retirement if you're just living on income from that. Just selling stocks or living on cash from that, you could keep your income very low, which is really fun the first few years of retirement. It's fun to say, you know what, I'm not paying much in taxes, but you must beware. Because if you also have a pretty sizable IRA on top of that, and if you're not withdrawing your IRA because you don't want to have to pay taxes on it, well, at some point you're going to have to withdraw it. At some point you're going to have a required minimum distribution. Right now, ages are 72 where that kicks in. Those ages might increase in the future, but at age 72, you're going to be required to start taking funds from that. And if you live too much on your brokerage accounts the first few years, by the time that you get to 72 or 75 or beyond, you're going to be required to start taking out pretty significant distributions from your IRA. And at that point, there's not much more you can do to hide. There's not much that you can do to manage your tax bracket because you're going to be required to be taking some of these distributions. So what does it have to do with? Well, in some cases, it may make sense to spend down your IRA in the first few years of retirement to almost manage the balance, to keep the balance at a manageable level so it doesn't become so large, creating really significant required distributions in the future. Another thing to be mindful of is Social Security taxes. So anywhere between 0 to 85% of your Social Security benefit is going to be included in your taxable income. That doesn't mean that 85% of it is taxed. What it means is between 0 and 85% of it is included in your taxable income. How can you get to 0? Well, hypothetically, if all of your income was just coming from Roth IRAs and Social Security, depending on what your Social Security benefit is, you might pay 0 in taxes on that Social Security. Social Security looks at something called your provisional income. So if your provisional income, and I'll do another episode on this another day, but if your provisional income is over a certain threshold, that determines how much of Social Security is included in your taxable income. 0%, 50%, all the way up to 85%. So as you're doing these conversions, or as you're determining where to pull funds from first, as you're looking at your overall withdrawal strategy, don't just look at what are you withdrawing and how does that impact the taxes on that withdrawal, but look at the second order effects of how does it impact the taxes you might be paying on Social Security, both today or in the future. Another thing to be mindful of when you're determining where to take funds from first in retirement is something called IRMAA surcharges. And what this is essentially surcharges or extra amounts that you might have to pay on your Medicare premiums. So Medicare Part B and Part D, there are premiums that you pay for that. But if your income is above certain thresholds, those premiums increase. Now, for today, for 2021, if your taxable income, if your adjusted gross income is under $176,000, you don't have any IRMAA surcharges. There's no Part B or Part D surcharge. But as your income increases above that, and these numbers are for married filing jointly, by the way, if you're single then it's half of that, but as your income increases above that, what that starts to do is it starts to increase the premiums that you have to pay each month for Medicare. So where you pull funds from first, that's another almost hidden tax that you have to be aware of, is how does where you pull income from today impact surcharges you'd have to pay on Medicare? How does income you pull in the future impact surcharges you might have to pay on Medicare? So keep that in mind as you're determining where to pull funds from first. And then lastly, understand how pulling money from different places in retirement impacts other tax strategies. Those tax strategies may be Roth conversions, which is can I start to convert money from IRAs to Roth IRAs to avoid big RMDs in the future and to protect against taxes in the future? Or those strategies might be tax gain harvesting. If your income is low enough, you can actually realize some gains on a taxable account and pay $0 in federal capital gains taxes for doing so. So as you can see, there's not just one simple, straightforward way to pull funds in retirement. What you want to do is you want to understand what are your fixed income sources? Social Security, pension, rental income, any income that's coming in that's not causing you to tap into your portfolio. That's your baseline. From there, understand where should you pull funds from first and pull funds from places that allow you to manage tax brackets, allow you to fill up some tax brackets or some tax thresholds without jumping into the next one, all the while being aware of how does this impact your Social Security tax, or how does this impact Medicare surcharges, or how does this impact overall tax strategy with things like Roth conversions, gain loss harvesting, things of that nature. So thanks for watching. This is James Conole with Root Financial Partners. If there's someone that you're thinking of that could benefit from this video, please share it with them. We'd love for them to get this type of information so that they can make the most of their retirement withdrawals and their retirement income. And if you're enjoying this video, please make sure to like this video. Please make sure to subscribe for more videos just like this. And if you want more great resources like this, there's a podcast I run called Ready for Retirement. And it's full of tips and strategies that you can utilize in addition to videos like this to create the most secure retirement possible. And if you're looking for services for how you can address your retirement planning, your investing to create that comfortable retirement, please check out our website at rootfinancialpartners.com to understand more about those services.